So I'm just going to add a little bit of darkening around that outer edge. And now I'm going to invert that and do the same thing on this one. And you can actually do this multiple times over the same thing because the texture on clouds can be pretty crazy. So it's okay if you do have to go on multiple passes to start getting the shapes that you want out of it. The thing that this won't create is if you want lighting on those individual parts, you'll have to paint that in on your own. But what this will start to give you as you paint these effects a little bit more. I should probably be painting this on my computer screen because it looks funny here. So I'm going to turn this way down now. We'll just make this kind of a subtle effect. You won't see it up there unless I paint it darker. So now I'm just changing where the whites are happening, making it so that things are rolling just a little bit more toward the outside. I'm sorry, that's too dark up there. I mean, too bright. The main thing that I'm wanting to get here is I want the overall appearance of the cloud to not be too white, because if I get too dark, then I don't have any room for any of the darker accents, which, let me just quickly toss in a silhouette of the cloud up here. So this is another way to do it. I can just kind of draw in the shapes that I want and then come in here with a smudge tool. The nice thing about having a smudge tool for clouds is that you can make the edges of the clouds just a little bit irregular. You don't want the clouds to be too tight around all the, too defined everywhere. So now I'm going to try and put in some lighting for these little bits. And I'm almost treating it like I would any other textured object, where I'm making it so that most of the definition and interest is happening around the terminator. But since it's a cloud, I can get away with a little bit more kind of lazy, quick slapdash stuff. So one thing that clouds do, that's really interesting, is they'll get these really intense spots, sometimes deep in the cracks. So, I'm imagining there might be a place like this where, just in between, I'm just getting this really intense bright spot, and it doesn't look necessarily more intense than the other stuff that I painted to you guys, but on my screen it's quite a bit more intense, and hopefully for the people who are watching this afterward, that little intense spot ends up feeling nice and like you would get on a cumulus cloud. So I think if you can paint this type of cloud, you can paint really any type of cloud. And I'm not going to necessarily show how you would get a photographic quality out of this, just because I don't think most of you would be interested in that unless you were painting from a photo. But what I do want is when we step back and look at the scene as a whole, that you feel like the cloud is not made out of a different material. It's got a different amount of like solidarity to it and stuff like that. The other thing that, none of this area is really that polished yet, so we would probably spend a bit more time on getting that to look right. It's more about just increasing the design in that area now. I've just got this kind of like random stuff. It's almost like how I showed you with, using different kinds of brushes and stuff. You're just like building up and then reacting to what you get. That's kind of what I'm doing here. I'm getting all these random shapes, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to design the cloud so that it doesn't just look like a bunch of random nodules of cloudiness. And so then the other thing that you want to take into consideration with clouds is the subsurface scattering. So it's going to tend to be warm. It's not going to be yellow warm, but you can get yellowish. So you'll end up with these areas where the light kind of scatters through the cloud. I've never seen subsurface scattering that is cooler. I imagine that there might be cases where the surface of something is a warm color and then what's inside it is cooler, but I've actually never seen that either. I think theoretically it's possible, but yeah, it's always warmer, I think, is a good rule of thumb. So you want this to be kind of non-uniform, the subsurface scattering. You don't want it to happen just like a big gradient. That's going to look funny. And we'll make that kind of subtle compared to the other lighting. And you can, it's looking a little bit funny through here, but you can start to see the potential right in this area where that light's coming through. If we are painting behind the cloud, I think I showed you guys that image earlier where you've got kind of this cloud that's got a bit of light passing through it, and then you've got the darker bits blocking the light. So you can do that. You can actually trace around these things and create something that feels like it's blocking the light just a little bit more, and even some of these can be more dense than the other. Oh, they said that's super quick. Sorry if that doesn't look like a cloud to any of you. But where it's going to start looking like a cloud is when you start to get that rim light in there, and we're passing the light a little bit more strongly through here. Are there any questions quick before we end, since class is over now? No? All right, I guess that's just about it then.
Hi.
Hey.
So I have